Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Riskstream Explores. I'm Pat Schmid, the president of the Institute's Riskstream Collaborative. I want to thank you for joining us today. We're going to be diving into a crucial issue in the insurance industry, cross-border payments. As insurance carriers, brokers, and reinsurers handle transactions worldwide, they face inefficiency in solvency payments, policyholder payouts, commissions, and multi-party settlements, all of which are really critical to treasury operations. High foreign exchange fees, delayed settlement times, and the complexity of handling multiple payment platforms are often making international payments really cumbersome. However, emerging financial technologies are beginning to streamline these processes, making the transactions faster, more secure, and more cost-effective. To discuss this topic, we're very pleased to be joined today by Lizzie Eisenberg from Lightspark, Austin Cornell from Zerohash, Aaron Daniel, and Dave Schwab from Resolvr. They'll share insights into the biggest challenges in the current system and how innovative payment solutions can enhance efficiency within our industry. So we're excited to go ahead and get started. To start here, we're going to ask each company to provide a brief intro and answer the same generic question here to get started. So I'm going to start with you, Lizzie, if it's okay. Please introduce the company Lightspark and tell us what are the biggest inefficiencies you're seeing in the insurance payments process, particularly dealing with internal solvency payments, policyholder payouts, and multi-party transactions for the broker carrier reinsurer community. Over to you, Lizzie.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Really pleased to speak about Lightspark and the industry at large. Lightspark is on a mission to build an open protocol for money for the internet age. Today, if we think about how money moves, the internet lacks an open protocol. Money moves on traditional infrastructure that was generally built in the 1970s, and this infrastructure is archaic. It's often really slow. It's expensive, and availability is limited. So, based on where the industry is today and what we're building, and we're building this instant network that is very low cost and that's global and that will help everybody move money quickly and instantly and efficiently. I think there's many, many ways that this can positively impact the insurance industry. So, for example, I think low cost and shorter settlements are really obvious components that will impact the insurance industry. Speed is directly related to cost efficiency. So, for example, faster placement of risks, I think would be beneficial for all parties. For brokers in particular, increased speed would help reduce administrative burdens. I think it would also help reduce the time it might take to negotiate complex deals. I lead global sales for us, so anything that can shorten deal cycles is very beneficial for the business. For carriers and reinsurers, if you can transfer risk more quickly or diversify risk, it helps protect from volatility. And then cost-wise, of course, if costs are lower across the board, the end consumer or the end business can benefit, and the industry can help keep these costs low for its customers, which is really beneficial. So in general, I think what we're building here at Lightspark, in particular, speed and faster settlement can improve business efficiencies, capital allocation, and positively impact risk management.
That's very helpful, Lizzie. Thank you. I'd like to turn it over to Austin for a moment here to introduce your company, Zerohash, and ask if you have any other thoughts on some of these inefficiencies in the payment process and how Zerohash can help.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pat. So Zerohash is the leading digital asset infrastructure company. We power payments products for the likes of Stripe and Franklin Templeton, and BlackRock and a few other major companies who want to get value out of digital assets, but need a partner with the compliance, the licensing, and the technical infrastructure to do so. So in the case of cross-border payments, the main challenge is how do we speed things up and drive down costs? With tons of correspondent banks in the middle run on a system that's over 50 years old, that's basically works like old email, and lots of humans and institutions in the middle, the latency and the cost of cross-border payments is just crazy high. And so what a number of companies have already done, and many are exploring, is to use digital assets to bridge fiat currencies and payment networks all around the world. And what our company does is we just give them access to that bridge.
Very exciting. Aaron and Dave, if you guys don't mind introducing Resolvr, we'd be very curious on your thoughts on, the inefficiencies associated with the insurance payments process, particularly when you're dealing with these, internal solvency payments, the policyholder payouts, or the multi-party transactions we were discussing previously. Curious your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. Aaron and Dave, co-founders of Resolvr. We are an insurtech that is rebuilding global payments for the insurance industry. We are facilitating distribution of premiums and claims in real time and in multiple currencies instantly and simultaneously. So what our platform does is we take the Bitcoin network and the Lightning network, and we marry that with the traditional banking rails to eliminate delays and take out the manual reconciliation and accounting processes that brokers and carriers and reinsurers have to contend with. And so, to put some kind of numbers and examples behind those efficiencies, right? A typical international premium payment from, say, a seeding carrier, an insurer somewhere, say in Latin America, who's then going to cede that risk on to, say, the London market, could typically see something between 13 or more intermediary banks or correspondent banks. And so each intermediary in that value chain passing the premiums along to the brokers and all the way up to the reinsurance panel and then splitting to the reinsurance panel, they've got a custody of the funds, they've got to account for the funds, they've got to reconcile and then send the funds on in this very serial process. And so that ends up being about 180 days from quote to collection for reinsurers. And that's just creating tremendous amounts of trapped value and just inefficiencies in costs to alleviate that and to unlock that trapped value. So, for example, the Lloyd's market in London in 2022, something like 68% of net written premiums were outstanding at the end of the year, which amounted to something astounding, like 20 billion pounds, right? And then Lloyd's is spending about £1 billion in to process that, right? So highly inefficient if they're spending £1 billion to process, and they still have 20 billion outstanding at the end of the year. So what Lloyd's could benefit from is even just dropping that settlement from up to 150 days from 180, a 30-day reduction would generate $150 million in risk-free returns, just being able to float that money faster, right? Having that time value of money.
Yeah, and those are crazy macro level statistics. And to bring it down more to the transactional level, we know from our brokers that a single error submission for correction to Lloyd's costs $200 per error, and it's a 12-week lead time to amend that. And that's not even considering the trouble when errors go undetected. There can be contractual and regulatory trouble off the back of that.
Seems like there's a lot of potential for efficiency across the board here. Moving on to kind of the next theme, maybe I could direct this question to Lizzie. we've been seeing increased discussions within your team and some others about a seamless global payment network. And I've heard your team specifically talk about a money grid. How could a frictionless real-time money grid transform multi-party payments within insurance?
I think the best way for us to share is to tee up our founder and CEO, David Marcus, to tell you firsthand.
And together, all of you are live in over 140 plus countries, and you reach over 300 million people. And so what if we actually put all of your reach, the connectivity you have with people, with payment systems, with deposits, with banks, together on this network? We believe it would create something that we call a money grid, which we shamelessly stole from one of our investors, Ribbit, without attribution. And so the money grid is this idea that you can move money just like you move anything else on the internet, all the way to the end, fully interoperable with existing payment systems and rails. And so this is actually something that we're really, really excited about, because we think it can completely change the game for people and businesses all around the world that are completely trapped with the inefficiencies of the current system.
I'm going to move on to Austin here. From your perspective, what challenges in commission payments and claim settlement would this technology potentially solve?
So I think back to what Dave just said about the 12-week lead time to reduce or to resolve a given error. And that applies to like Lloyd's framework, but even baked into the network of cross-border payments itself in Swift. The process for correcting an error takes days, people, banks all in the middle. And then if you're lucky, the sender of the payment gets their money back if everybody agrees to it. When we're talking about like Bitcoin, the network, which is really what the Resolvr team is building on to speed up payments and reduce costs dramatically, what Lizzie and the Lightspark team are laser focused on seeing come to light is using the power of the Bitcoin network to simply bridge the traditional payment rails that currently exist today to on an open network that nobody owns, that can drive the cost down to pennies and the speed of settlement down to seconds, even sub 1 second. And so what that means for like claims payments is you can get paid instantly. You can pay for things instantly. And this, of course, not just hits the insurance market, but cross-border payments broadly. If anyone remits funds from the US to Brazil and they wanted to do it the traditional way through correspondent banking, like good luck if you're an individual. But if you wanted to do it bridging an open, neutral, fast, cheap network, for the likes of, say, sending it through Nubank and their integration with the Lightning Network as they're doing right now, you could do that instantly and very cheaply peer-to-peer. And so that's the same principles apply for claims and other types of payments in the insurance market. It's about making them fast, cheap, and on a neutral layer that's meant to move money and value instantly.
If we can kind of double click on that for just a second, a lot of folks tend to say, or see Bitcoin as really this storage or saving asset. But it sounds like the network has some specific advantages, Austin. And, you're kind of hinting at that already, but how can that network as this decentralized payment infrastructure improve some of the efficiencies here that we've been talking about within insurance transactions? Curious your take.
Yeah, so there's an interesting race going on of like which company or companies can connect these local payment networks together. Think like ACH in the US with SEPA in Europe, with SPAY in Mexico and PIX in Brazil. And what you need is something that is fast, cheap, and neutral, meaning it's owned by nobody. Because if you have a network that's connecting all of these together, that's owned by somebody, then you just have something like Visa or MasterCard all over again. And then they set the rules and they take their fees, and we're just kind of recreating what already exists. And so the only network out there that meets those properties is Bitcoin. And it's very distinct from the network and the asset. Whereas the asset, like you said, Pat, is a great way to store value over the long term for oneself and one's company, and maybe in the future one's government. But the network is totally different. And it's really the Bitcoin network is a database that nobody owns and anybody can access. And it has a ledger that everyone can read instantly without anyone else's permission. And that's what makes it a really the ideal network for moving money around the world.
It's exciting. It's the reason that I got into blockchain technology is Bitcoin, just reading about it. And it's exciting to see a lot of the potential come to fruition. On that note, maybe I could move back to you, Lizzie, with a quick question. Given the delays that we've talked briefly about here in settlement times and the inefficiencies that were covered earlier in foreign exchange conversions, how do Lightspark and Zerohash, how could they collaborate in accelerating insurance transactions, and how do they compare to the conventional, banking payment systems?
Sure. So first to, I think, expand on Austin's point, Bitcoin, the network. So if we look at the network itself, the layer one, it is by design. It is really stable and doesn't change. And that is very much, which is by design, which is great for a base layer for payments and to build on top of. But for a global payment system, we need things that are fast. We need things that are instant. So we are all in this room, the Resolvr team included and Austin included, leveraging the Lightning Network to make Bitcoin move quickly. So that's the layer two that really enables the speed and the instant settlement, which is required for payments. So just wanted to clarify, that piece. But in terms of comparing the traditional network versus what we're building with the Zerohash team. So if we go back to, and I know the Resolvr team mentioned this a bit, but if we look at traditional ways of moving money, if we think of for consumers, people are utilizing SWIFT very, very often still. SWIFT is moving $5 trillion a day globally. And again, this is infrastructure built in the 70s. Fees are high. Maybe they're touching less than 13 correspondent banks, like Aaron mentioned, for the consumer payments, but there's a lot of hops that add cost. Settlement's really slow. So the Resolvr team was mentioning for the insurance industry 180 days from quote, which is so long. I mean, but even if you think of you and me, if we're sending a wire from the US to Europe, that could take 5 business days. And importantly, availability is limited. So the traditional systems work during banks' business hours. They don't work 24/7, 365, which, Bitcoin is always on, which is a huge benefit. And what we're building with Zerohash is leveraging Lightspark's Lightning infrastructure in their broader offering. And we've built something really exciting with Zerohash in the US in particular, which leverages the UMA protocol, which is Universal Money Address. It is a open standard that looks and feels like an email for money. And a great example of this standard in action is with Nubank in Brazil. Nubank customers in their consumer banking app are able to send Brazilian real to USD instantly, 24/7, 365, at the lowest fees in the corridor. And Zerohash is supporting this flow on the US side. On the US side, they're licensed and regulated, so they're able to do the conversion from Bitcoin into USD. And then we're leveraging traditional systems like real-time payments to push that value instantly into a consumer's bank account. So we're able to bring this instant, real-time, low-cost flow to life in partnership with Zerohash. And like Austin mentioned, that's one example, but we could certainly build this in partnership with all parties on this call to really benefit the insurance industry.
Very exciting. Austin, I have a question for you. So from a technological innovation standpoint, with what Lizzie's mentioning about the collaboration between Lightspark and Zerohash, how does this allow your organizations to really, we talked a little bit about speed, but it would be good to really zone in on the security of international insurance payments compared to, more legacy type systems that Lizzie was mentioning.
Yeah, so earlier I mentioned that Bitcoin is the ideal network because it has a ledger that everyone can read. But if you're in a private insurance company, filing claims for customers or other beneficiaries, you don't want everyone to see, who's getting what. And the security of Bitcoin, the network with a capital B, is that it's protected by energy, and that's a whole separate session, but it's protected by lots and lots and lots of energy. However, the network on top of it, the Lightning Network, which is what Lightspark has built their company on and extended its capabilities for, is private, is inherently private. And that's how you get the benefits of Bitcoin security with a private channel-based payment network in the Lightning Network. And all this is really the corollary is that these are sort of databases on which money moves nowadays. And for nodes in the database and the network, they just want the benefits out of it. They just want to really cheaply send and receive money, and they want to be able to track the payments and reconcile the payments. So the collaboration between Lightspark and Zerohash makes that possible. You don't have to worry about dealing with the kind of wonky aspects of the Lightning Network, or even think about the touching a Bitcoin or what the price of it is, or how to open and close a channel. None of that you have to do. You also don't have to get any specific licenses to get all the value of the Lightning Network that we've discussed today if you work with Zerohash and Lightspark together. So we just bring the package solution really neatly tied into APIs.
It's fascinating. I think, before we dive back into the more insurance angle, one more technical question that I'm sure folks are asking about. There is a lot of volatility in the market related to crypto. And a logical question would be, how do Lightspark and Zerohash mitigate the risks of this, digital asset volatility in insurance transactions? And how does this, compare to traditional FX risks in international payments? Lizzie, maybe I could direct that question to you.
Sure. It really goes back to the beauty of Lightning. Transactions are cash final instantly or near instantly, which is very different compared to that 180-day settlement or that 5-day settlement for SWIFT for consumers doing a wire transfer. So when you think about what we have built on Lightning, and in particular UMA, where there is FX involved. So if we go back to the Nubank Brazilian real to USD flow, the FX exposure is very, very minimal. It's about 30 seconds, depending on the parties on each side. And the Bitcoin volatility isn't a factor because of that instant settlement on the network. So because transactions occur so quickly you don't have the same window of exposure that you see in more traditional payments and traditional payment systems. So FX exposure, very, very minimal. Institutions on each side of the UMA protocol can set that window of what that exposure will be. It's generally 30 seconds. And then again, from a Bitcoin perspective, with that near instant cash final settlement, it's not a factor.
It's really interesting. It'll be interesting to move that back to kind of the reinsurance insurance specific angle. And maybe this question could be to Aaron and Dave and the Resolvr team. Brokers are managing complex multi-party transactions. They're often facing delays and compliance challenges. Curious, what challenges do brokers encounter when they're reconciling and distributing payments? And how does your team streamline the commission distribution and settlement processes within treasury operations?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
It's a great point. Yeah, go ahead.
Here,
Aaron.
I'll take it, Dave.
Yeah.
So we talked about that fragmented system where you have many different parties in the value chain, from maybe just a cedent all the way up to the reinsurer. Forget about a final buyer of insurance, right? And the process of being a relay race where each party's taking the funds into their systems, they're accounting for it, they're reconciling it, and then that process, though, with the multiple counterparties, is done manually with spreadsheets and via email and picking up the phone and calling those counterparties, and maybe the person in the accounting department, it's their birthday, they're on vacation, so that adds another week of delay. So all of this is the human element and the manual element, which creates those delays and really contributes a lot to that 180 days, right? It's not just the wire time. And so what our platform does, Resolvr's Premium Manager, RPM, consolidates those many different individual disparate ledgers into one single platform that coordinates and automates the invoicing, distribution, and accounting. And so the counterparties, bring in all their contracts, and that becomes a single source of truth. And that drives the programmatic splits and distributions and accounting. And this comes back to, I think, something we haven't quite touched on as much with respect to Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. And we talked about its speed, we talked about its security, we talked about how we've dampened volatility with instant settlement, right, and the privacy aspects. But it's also programmable money, right? And this unlocks just really astounding use cases, and it's one of the features that Resolvr is using so heavily. So the way it works is parties import those contract terms. Resolvr generates a single invoice that contains that payload of all the information from the contract and who gets what and what currencies, and we program that in to the invoice so that when the seeding insurer pays it, all the parties are paid instantly. There's a split that happens through the Bitcoin network, through the Lightning network, and we can also peg into different networks, stablecoin networks, and then convert out with our on and off ramp partners in different jurisdictions into the recipient's preferred currency. And again, that Forex transaction can happen very quickly, so the volatility is dampened significantly from even traditional processes. So we're streamlining that entire fragmented process with Bitcoin's programmability and Bitcoin speed, and bringing it all into this single platform. And then we're also streamlining kind of what Austin was talking about, the technology behind it. We're abstracting all of this away so that brokers, reinsurers don't need to go and adopt an entire new tech stack or hire a Bitcoin engineer to integrate these systems. We've built that insurance specific front facing interface, that on ramp to these digital superhighways that Zerohash and Lightspark are building, and so that's how we're streamlining and onboarding the industry to these powerful networks.
That's super
Right.
helpful. Dave, wanted to see if you had any commentaries there as well.
Yeah, you mentioned treasury operations too. We mentioned the complexity, the liquidity management, the forex exposure. But obviously this is a complicated chain with many different parties. Just forecasting that liquidity and matching inbound funds to outbound obligations, that's a lot of what drives the lead time in this complexity, and it requires, very intricate, detailed manual efforts in order to reconcile that and try to bring some predictability to this. It also sometimes requires credit facilities and credit lines just to have the necessary liquidity to be able to service those obligations. So you might imagine a broker knows that they're owed 5 million in commissions, but they can't reliably predict when that's coming, when it'll arrive, the forex rates that are applied to it when it does. So having instant settlement in that programmatic, transparent tracking, Resolvr gives those treasury teams better visibility, better control, and they automatically know the reconciliation is there the moment it happens, at the moment of the transaction, and it turns, once what was a cost center and an overhead burden into a strategic asset in terms of your ability to manage working capital and to manage those forecasts much more accurately than you were able to in the past.
Really interesting. Curious if we can kind of stay with this theme for just one more question here. Maybe this question can go back to Aaron. With the reinsurance payments spanning various countries, and of course there's various regulatory systems associated with those countries, how does Resolvr ensure compliance with these various jurisdictions and their laws while maintaining the efficiency that Dave was just speaking about?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that we've been thinking about since day one at Resolvr. Mostly because it's my background. I was a practicing attorney for over 12 years, so it's something that I'm always fixated on, right? And so our approach is really built on kind of 3 main pillars, and the first is this hybrid architecture that we've been describing, where we have the speed, efficiency, and programmability, the privacy, the security of Bitcoin and Lightning Network, but we're merging it for final settlement into existing bank accounts and depositing into those existing bank accounts. So most jurisdictions have very specific requirements about where brokers are allowed to keep client funds, how they handle those premiums and funds, which type of accounts, financial accounts, satisfy the regulators' rules, right? And so by allowing our customers to continue to use those accounts, we're maintaining their existing processes, which they know to be compliant, right? But we're speeding it up and speeding up the deposits. Deposits go to the statutory trust account, but just much faster. The second pillar is what Dave was talking about with these detailed audit trails and transaction records. We document every split, every currency conversion, all the payments, and those reports are available as soon as the transaction happens, right? It's not a reactive thing. It is a byproduct of the actual transaction itself. So at any moment, you have real-time visibility into all the payments. So this is really powerful. It means that a system like Resolvr is even more compliant because you have more visibility. You can track problematic payments, errors when they occur instead of months down the line. When you do the reconciliation, you can get ahead of compliance issues. And then the third is just that, going back to having that dialogue with our customers, the brokers, what their constraints are, what their regulations are, also the regulators, like the private markets, Lloyd's, what their requirements are, and just continuing to update our framework as those frameworks continue to update.
An interesting mirror, it is just like with treasury management. It goes from an overhead task to a center for business intelligence. It's the same with compliance. It enhances it rather than compromises it. And by embedding those regulatory requirements directly into the transaction flow, where the actual metadata associated to the transaction is there, to support that, we're reducing the risk of, a human error. We're reducing the risk of, not following that compliance process, and we're able to operate that in real time, flagging everything. And it also opens up, reduces that complexity, but opens up new markets to new jurisdictions with their own inherent compliance complexity. But now that we're operating that, we can do that very seamlessly, and we're focused on doing that seamlessly between many of these emerging markets and the London market and the Lloyd's market. So, having that cross-border set of capabilities that opens up a lot of new opportunities for brokers who couldn't previously, in a cost-effective way, service those jurisdictions.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear from the discussion so far. There's definitely benefits in this new approach, and it seems like it's compliant. So I guess the final theme I'd like to ask all the teams involved about is a bit more about how to get to the next step. And what, if anything, is constraining the teams from making that move right away. So maybe I could start this very first question here with Austin. We've seen if the inefficiencies in the current payment process, and we've seen some of the alternatives having certain efficiencies associated with it. What do you think is the biggest barrier preventing, widespread adoption of the solutions we've been talking about here today from Lightspark, Zerohash, and Resolvr within the insurance industry?
I would say the biggest barrier to widespread adoption of what we're talking about is the lack of like a holistic platform. And that's what excites me a lot about Resolvr, because you do need a platform that knows insurance inside and out and knows how to be compliant in every relevant part of the world. That's no small order. All of the technological pieces do exist out there, but someone needs to put them together into a cohesive platform to make it useful for all the players in the insurance industry. So there's that. And then second to that, I would say is like inertia, that all current players are used to doing things as they are today. And so moving to a new database of moving money around is a big step, but one that is obviously meaningful when you're saving many, many, many hours and many, many, many dollars.
Yeah, it makes sense. Curious of your opinion, Dave, the Resolvr opinion. Do you think, the resistance to adopting new payment technologies in the insurance and reinsurance industry is primarily due to lack of awareness, maybe concerns over the regulatory compliance that you were talking a little bit about, or just general reluctance to shift to something new from a traditional financial system?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think those are all part of it. And there are various reasons to do or not to do something new. And those are very valid, and they're valid questions. I think for us, a lot of it comes back to that 180 days, which if you ask a lot of people, they'll say they wish it was 180 days. It could be even worse. You can imagine all these handoffs and reconciliations. It gets very complicated, but it's just accepted. It's just accepted as the cost of doing business right now, because it's always been that way. It's not on the radar as a problem to be solved. In the way that they've created their revenue lines is with this problem, this huge rock in the middle of the stream is something they're just used to having there. Now, when you can remove that or change that, I think you can present a few different hooks to get people interested, and overcome this resistance to change. I think demonstrating the power and the ROI was, so there's going to be a hook there, new lines of business, new jurisdictions, just less headache around treasury management and around, payments and remittances. That's certainly a hook as well. But you can look forward to the results of that case study being published by Resolvr and some of our customers later this year that'll detail some real world results and provide some hard data behind this that I think can help people get over that hump.
That's excellent. Yeah, we're looking forward to that for sure, and appreciate you providing that input. Thanks, Dave. Lizzie, quick question for you. Maybe we can close things out with this final question. Curious to how critical you believe the collaboration between kind of more the legacy financial system or institutions and newer emerging organizations like Lightspark and the others, that collaboration, how important do you believe it is in modernizing the insurance industry's payment infrastructure?
Broadly, I think it's critical. We can't reinvent this system that has been here for decades in one fell swoop. If you think about all three of our businesses that we've been talking about today, we all interact with legacy systems to some extent, whether that's on-ramps and off-ramps, but there is, it's not just Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin paired with traditional systems to create a solution that is really valuable and meaningful for end customers. At the end of the day, I don't think we can tell the insurance industry to adopt the Bitcoin network alone. That's not going to solve their needs. We need to utilize the benefits of the network, which we all discussed at length today, and make it really approachable and remove all of the complexity, which I think all three of our companies are really focused on delivering. We need to deliver the benefits without the complexity, and make it really easy and approachable to achieve those benefits while still being able to participate within the legacy systems. I think it was Aaron or Dave that mentioned, we don't want the insurers to have to change their bank account at the very end of the process. That all needs to stay intact. And everything we're building, all of us, is to support, the way people are doing business today and swapping out the old, slow, hard rails for something really easy. So I think the collaboration's critical for, I think, all parties involved.
It makes a lot of sense. It's a really, really exciting time, and I feel there's a lot more to come here. And we're curious of the viewers' thoughts as well. Please reach out. There may be a role here in collaboration, hence the name Riskstream Collaborative, in bringing the insurance industry together to participate with the folks on the line here. So very grateful for their participation, lending their expertise and insights on the evolving landscape of cross-border payments in the insurance industry and reinsurance industry. Thank you so much to our guest speakers for participating here today. I learned a lot. And it's really clear that new technologies are offering this faster, more efficient way to process transactions. And the insurance industry is going to be really at a pivotal moment where this is really going to matter going forward. So it's an exciting time for us to hold these discussions and see if there's new ways of doing business. So if you're involved in the global insurance sector, we hope this conversation has provided a valuable perspective. Be sure to visit our website, riskstream.org, for more information on technology and insurance. And we thank everyone for watching.